Alright, so I'm going to be doing my presentation on the Great Pyramid of Giza. I'm centering it specifically around the controversy around how the Great Pyramid of Giza was constructed. There have been a couple theories ranging from slaves to UFOs, but I'm going to go over that later. The Great Pyramid of Giza, if you guys don't know, is a 481-foot step pyramid that's in Egypt. It's southwest about 50 miles from Cairo and west of the Nile. It's a four-sided pyramid and it goes to a 51.5-degree angle, which is extremely important in the mathematics and the architecture of the Great Pyramid itself. For one, it's extremely stable for that specific type of pyramid, for the step pyramid itself. It's a very stable angle. Mathematically, it correlates to a lot of patterns that exist in nature, like the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio. Their understanding of mathematics and architecture was extraordinary, and it existed alongside many other things. They understood complex planning, mass production of materials, large-scale organized events, long-term planning, because this pyramid is hypothesized to have taken anywhere from 10 to 20 years to build. Alongside this, they have the arts. Painting, language, written art, mathematics, as in written mathematics, counting, politics. They were as complex, if not more of a complex society than the one we live in now. Very old, very ancient, much history exists even today, just in the architecture itself. Greeks couldn't touch them, like they're very famous for their mathematics, but they didn't have a serious understanding of the mathematical patterns that exist in nature, even though they did have abstract formulas like Archimedes' principle of water disposition. We totally and completely don't give them credit or shine them in the proper light that they deserve. We paint them as one that is constantly getting new rulers, one that is constantly changing religions, that is constantly has dynamic warfare, and we paint these things as negative things instead of just the natural changings of a dynamic society like our own. We go through presidents, we go through different cultural forms, we don't go through different beliefs on how we should structure our society. That's just how human developments and constructs evolve, and it's a completely natural process in terms of human nature and human societies. The Great Pyramid of Giza was dated through a pretty abstract process involving the star Sirius. This star has a periodic and trackable pathway through the sky. About every 365 days, it appears in the exact same point, and the Egyptians used this in the past to track when the Nile would flood. In the modern calendar, we tracked back the path of Sirius through time to a part in time where it juxtaposed with the Egyptian calendar. And through this process, we figured out that it's a rough estimate, but it's about August 23rd, 2560 BC. We do know that it was built under the reign of Pharaoh Khufu. King Khufu's reign was from 2589 to 2566 BC. I think this might date the completion of it, but it's obviously not in cotangents with the pharaoh's reign, and so there has to be some malleability with that date because we can't track it properly. I think a way we could track it properly is perhaps through existing historical texts that might be hidden in some of the areas of Egypt that we haven't uncovered yet. I guess we'll have to save that for a later date. I can't think of another way to date it, and neither could they, I guess, because they haven't. Now, centering specifically on the Great Pyramid itself, it represents a lot of things. It represents the Egyptian society itself. It holds their mathematical understanding, their architectural understanding, their planning ability, their religious beliefs. The pyramid was constructed for King Khufu, and basically his entire life was designed for his death. It was completely planned for his death. This pyramid is believed to have been some sort of a cannon or some sort of a doorway or ladder or staircase, seemingly to being a staircase, considering it's a step pyramid, to the celestial world. It was a way for him to transcend the material world and life and gain immortality among the gods. This is based off of hieroglyphic evidence. They had to organize their entire civilization in order to build this thing. It's not like it was just a small fraction of society that was organized for this project on the side during his lifetime, and then there was a majority of other affairs that were taking up their time. No, this was the core project for their entire society during this pharaoh's lifetime. It's almost like a three-dimensional self-portrait. It really is. It shows who they are just through their endeavorment, through their desire to show their capabilities and their understanding of the world through this extremely complex process to build this pyramid. And they did it, and the reason it took so long and there was so much effort put into it is because it lasted so long. Thousands of years since it was constructed, and yet we're still able to reconstruct all of this understanding just through what's left. That just shows their genius. I'm sure that was intentional, and that's something I'm trying to emphasize. It wasn't just something the king wanted to do for himself. It was something the entire society invested their energy toward. I will introduce the evidence for that now. So, in 2002, at the beginning of the 21st century, the pyramid builder's overseer's tomb was discovered a couple miles away from the pyramid. And once it was opened, it was discovered that in his backbone, there were specific alterations to its structure, which hinted and supported the conclusion that he had worked on the pyramid for many, many years because of the wear on it. It had certain stress fractures and manipulations to the bone's architecture and structure, which only occurs when you lift heavy objects for a long time in a majority of your life. At his tomb's location, it was discovered that this was an entire area that was dedicated to the well-being of the pyramid builders. There was calf bones, thousands of them, millions of fish bones. There was plenty of bakeries. There were sleeping quarters. It's extraordinary, and it showed that they were perceived in Egyptian society with a very high regard. There was a lot of energy put into their well-being through medical care. An example being somebody had to get his arm amputated because his hand had gotten crushed on one of the blocks while they were building, and it was amputated perfectly, and he was able to use the part that went off of his elbow to help support and lift blocks and continue to put energy into it. It showed that he cared and wanted to do it, and also that people in society cared about him because they did a proper amputation. It also shows their phenomenal understanding of health, blood, and the human body. Now, in the tomb where the overseer body was discovered, they also found information which led to the conclusion that there were structures in the hierarchy of pyramid builders. There were subgroups of 50 people, and each group had a name, like the strong ones, or the snakes. There were many, many names that were listed because there were so many of these subgroups. And these small groups of 50 existed in larger groups or factions of 1,000 men, and then these groups of 1,000 men existed in the whole hierarchy of about 10,000 men, but it varied at the peak amount of workers, it was about 40,000, but it just depended on what part of the pyramid they were building. There was a lot of intentionality put into building this pyramid, and people went over and above to put and pour all of what they knew into it. It was a community effort, and that is the current belief today, that it wasn't just the king who valued building this pyramid, it was this society. They used it as a trophy case to display the top pinnacles of their knowledge in each area. And you can see that, and I think I've displayed that through describing their ability to plan things, their understanding of mathematics through the golden ratio inherent in the architecture and the proportions of the pyramid. Despite these discoveries, I don't think we have a complete understanding of how it was done. It's hard to believe that 10,000 people in about 10 years moved 2.1 million 4-ton blocks of limestone into this formation with plenty of things inside of it. Shafts, burial chambers, walkways, exits, entrances. Just to include one of those requires so much work and so much reorganization in the architecture. So to include all of them was a phenomenal endeavor, and they did it perfectly, as you can see, because it's still there today and it's still preserved extremely well and pretty close to how it was when it was first built. There's key information that we're missing, and the Egyptian society is a very fascinating one, and I think they're one that deserves a lot of effort to be put into understanding how they did what they did and what they knew. I think that we should put a lot of energy into trying to reconstruct their thought patterns, their beliefs, and their processes in discovering how to build these giant pyramids, to build these extremely sophisticated tombs in the hills. They were genius, and we can learn a lot from them.